Just like a spark that's breaking out. Can't make a stop, can't turn back now. We know that there's no room for doubt. No, we can't turn back now. I see danger in your eyes. They know we'll burn down the night. Only just like the sunrise. You know that we gonna light it up. Tonight, we gonna light it up, babe. Tonight, we gonna light it up. Just like the sunrise, we gonna light it up.
Hello. Welcome to the HVAC God live show. My computer is acting a little funny tonight, so we're going to try to work through this. I've got some cool things to share with you. Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday night to join us live. Feel free to say hello in the chat where you're located. That's always fun to know. And like I say, I've got quite a few things to go over with you guys tonight. If for some reason my computer decides to restart because it's trying to download an update that I was hoping would be done by now. If it does it in the middle of the show, tries to restart, I'm going to try to stop it if it tries. But if it does end up restarting, then I'll be right back as soon as the computer restarts. So just bear with me on that. That said, bear with me here. I'm going to try to get our chat popped up here. I normally would have all this done, but as I said, the computer was acting a little wonky there. And once I get the chat going here, we'll start with our first question of the night for you. I usually ask one question to you at least, and we'll get that going here. So bear with me here while I get the chat going. Feel free to say hello. Let me know where you're located. And then once I get this going here, bear with me here. It's here in Virginia, it's raining very, very hard. In fact, our lights were flickering, and at first I thought it was a dimmer light, something wrong with the dimmer, and that wasn't a good enough answer for my wife. So I ended up calling a friend of mine who has been doing electric work forever, and we chatted about it. And then we basically were pretty sure that it had something to do with the rain, whether it's that it's grounding or it's affecting the voltage or whatever it is that the rain is causing. Maybe something is grounding out, but it was making them flicker every second or two. And ultimately, my wife texted our neighbor, and that's when they were like, we're having the same issue. And then finally she was like, okay, got it. So it's not just something going on in our house, something we need to be scared of or anything. Let's see. I've almost got the chat going here, guys. My dad used to say I can't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And so it's a curse that I just can't do two things at once. I am not a multitasker, but I think I've got our chat up here now. And let me try to share that. Share. Bam. That should be popping up now. Okay. All right. Good enough. All right. So let's jump over to our chat before I share tonight's question for you. Gary says, good evening, Josh and friends. Looking forward to this evening's presentation. Me too. Thanks for joining us, Gary, as always. Let's see. Bob, hello, Joshua, and everyone else. Good to see you, Bob. Everything HVACR. Steve, good to see you. What up? Ryan, as always, good to see you. Hey, hey. Emery, can you remind me how you determine faulty metering device? Ooh, that is a loaded question. Um, I guess the we to back up a little bit here, let's just automatically assume that you're talking about a TXV. Pistons are pretty easy to determine if something is faulty or not acting correctly. But there's electronic expansion valves and all kinds of other metering devices. But TXV is probably the most common these days, especially um, with since SEER went to SEER 2 and the, to me, a lot of valves are misdiagnosed when the technician doesn't seem to understand how the valve is supposed to operate. And I'll give you a good example. I've had technicians say to me, well, I'm getting wonky pressures. I'm getting high on one gauge and low on another. And we'll start to talk through that. And what we'll figure out is it's appearing that way because the metering device is starving for refrigerant or it's being flooded or whatever the case is. The metering device is opening and closing based on the temperature of the coil. And so I think when folks are determining if a TXV is bad or not, they a lot of times will misdiagnose that TXV because they are missing simply how it operates. And so you can adjust how that valve is operating simply by adjusting the temperature that the valve sees with the temperature sensing bulb. And you can hold it in your hands, you can dip it in ice water, you can maybe even add a little refrigerant. I know that's not the most best way. I've heard other guys on, especially YouTube. I'm sure Ty Branneman would probably be grabbing me by the ear if he heard me say that. But let's be honest, if you've got 7 service calls that day and you're just trying to determine is this system is it something with the TXV or is it simply just a little low on refrigerant here and the TXV is opening or closing based on that. And so sometimes just adding half a pound of refrigerant will tell you something. All of a sudden you'll see your pressure start to, that valve is searching and it's trying to, figure out whether it needs to open or close or whatever. So how do I determine a faulty metering device? It just depends on the circumstances. If we're talking about a TXV, I'm going to be keeping all of what I just mentioned in mind in the diagnosis, if you will. I think that there is no way, in my opinion, to diagnose a TXV simply by just looking at your pressures. I think there's way more to it than that. I think most good technicians would agree with that. That just simply looking at the pressures, it would be difficult to immediately say whether or not the metering device is good or bad. Now, if it was completely closed, I have seen that, and there are products on the market that will lubricate that valve. And I have seen those work, right? There are guys that might push back on that, but ultimately, I think just, again, in your diagnosis, just understanding what exactly this valve is trying to do, what it's supposed to be doing, and what it might be doing if it's not seeing what it wants to see, right? Hopefully that makes sense. I know that was kind of a long-winded answer, but it's not as easy as just saying, oh, well, if your suction pressure is low and your head pressure is high, then you immediately have a bad TXV. Well, that's not necessarily true. Maybe it is showing that way because it's trying to, make that coil colder or warmer or whatever, and it's operating that way. So Gail says, Nevada, hello, hello. Good to see you, Gail, as always. Steve says, superheat and subcooling. that's definitely a good start, right? Superheat, how full is the evaporator? Subcool, how full is the condenser? I like it. I like it. Lego Batman says GFCI. Maybe I should look at having some better protection for my entire home. They've made it a lot easier on us, right? It used to be quite pricey to get full whole home surge protection, but I think it's not as bad as it used to be in comparison. So maybe I should look at that. Ryan says, "Hey Josh, have you officially switched the live stream to every 2 weeks?" No, I have not. I just I realized something at one point, and that is I was just putting everything else on hold sometimes. There were times when I was doing this show when I didn't have internet, or I didn't have, I think one night I remember doing it and the power went out, right? I've done it a few times sick. I've done it a few times around family events. And somewhere along the way, I just said, the numbers are always better. More of you guys join me when I don't do my show. If like last week I didn't do my show, and our numbers are very strong tonight. We had almost 30 people. We have 26 on here at the moment. And so I'm not saying that's a reason to not do my show, but what I've just learned is if I've got a family event or I'm sick or the power's out, then I'll see you the next week. And maybe you guys, some of you might not like that, but that's just kind of what we're doing here. I do the show as often as I can, but if for some reason I can't, then I'll post it on the community tab on the YouTube channel. Hey, no show tonight, and just to let you guys know. So, so officially we're still every Tuesday night, although you guys know that's not always the case. Hello, Josh, Los Angeles, California. Garth, did you move? Have you always been in LA, or are you on a trip? I thought you were closer to me than that at one point. Steve says airflow, airflow, airflow. Yes, ABC. I actually have a video coming out on that, Steve, because I had a guy that was actually misdiagnosing TXVs, believe it or not. I was helping him, and he was like, the new R32 and 454B TXVs, they're not as good as the 410A. They're not being set correctly in the factory. And I just told him, I said, look, adjust the fan speed. Just, well, that's not what the that's not, I said, I don't care. I want you to make it faster. I want you to move more air across that coil. And he did. And all of a sudden he saw his pressures change. And that immediately made him understand. And his response to me was, well, we were not having to adjust the fan speed on installations originally. And I said, well, you should have been. You should always be reading the instructions and setting your fan speed according to manufacturer specs. And he's like, I'll never, not again. I'll always read the instructions and set airflow before even looking at pressures, which is what we want, right? Pistons don't have the issues of TXVs. That I think we can agree on that, right? I think that's a blanket statement, but I think it's easy to say that. But I will say that TXVs, especially if you take those few years out, those of us that were in the trade, those few years when the oils and the metering devices, they were actually gumming up the metering device. Once they had that straight, I like a system with a TXV because I think it's more efficient, but it also, I can dial in that refrigerant. I can get my subcooled dead on, and by gosh, that Delta T, if the airflow is set correctly, airflow before the charge. But once I do all that correctly, I honestly think they work better. I think that TXV being able to open and close based on a mild or heavy load day, I think it makes a big difference. We're going to take a break from the chat. I appreciate you guys joining me on a Tuesday night, taking time out and being so lively in the chat. And I'm going to hit you with a question. And tonight's question. Let me find my cute little video here. Tonight's question for you. And tonight's question for you is a simple one, and that is, have you ever experienced a scam at all? It didn't have to be a super complex one, but if you're a homeowner, did you get scammed by a home service company, HVAC, plumbing, electrical? Have you ever experienced someone trying to scam you? I'd love to hear about that. I think it's something we're going to talk a little bit more tonight. I think some of these scams are getting more interesting. We're starting to see some things we've never seen in our trade before from a scam standpoint. I think there's a special place in the afterlife for people that scam others. If you are taking advantage, especially of the elderly, but that's a whole nother topic. Let's see. Ryan says whole home surge protectors are about $300 to $400 now before installation. I remember looking at them. It's been a little bit since I looked at them, but I remember looking at them and thinking that they were not as complicated to put in as I once thought. But I have not looked at them in a while, if I'm honest. Emery says, I am curious, but how do techs read manifold gauges to determine refrigerant charge? It's a good question, Emery. So there are digital gauges, there are analog gauges. Uh, if I'm honest, I right up until probably a year or two ago, only used analog gauges. I trusted them more, and I still do. I trust those needles that are telling me what that pressure is, and of course, saturation temperature. I trust them more than a digital readout for a number of reasons. But I know immediately if I connect my hose and that needle pops up to whatever number it pops to, then I trust that number more typically. But as Steve pointed out, we want to make sure airflow is correct first. We want to make sure we have a good clean system, clean filter, clean evaporator coil. And then when we're looking at our pressures, there are different ways of, so there's a superheat measurement, there's a subcool measurement, and then there's, something to be said for just looking at what the pressures are without taking any measurements. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to just simply look at pressures and immediately know if the refrigerant's perfect, but I'll know if my delta T is good and I'm putting gauges on a system that I've never put gauges on before, and everything is working well, and I see those needles pop up there. I'll know that everything is where it should be. I'll know, especially if you've been doing this a while. A lot of us that have been doing this a while, we can look at pressures and kind of know if something is off almost immediately just by looking at those pressures. There's exceptions to every rule, but ultimately that's the case. So how do techs read manifold gauges? You're looking at pressures. There's a PSI number, and then a lot of times there's something we call a saturation temperature, and all that basically means is pressure and temperature coincide. So if you have a high pressure, you have a higher temperature, and vice versa. And the saturation temperature is always different depending on which refrigerant you're working with. So those in fact, a lot of the analog gauges still have, it'll have your temperature and your pressures on there, and it'll have different colors based on which refrigerant you're working with. Analog gauges, you'll have to set which temperature. In a lot of cases, you'll tell it which refrigerant you're working on, and then it will spit out the readings for you on those. So, to go one step further than that, to actually do some of these measurements, you also have to get the surface temperature of the line sets. So a lot of guys will have temperature clamps. Some of the digital gauges have the clamps built onto them, or can connect to them in some way. I've got the wireless field piece ones where, it'll give the readings to your phone, but you have to have that measurement to even know if your superheater subcool is correct. So hopefully that helps. Garth says always LA. Garth, for some reason I thought you were closer to me that than that, but that's great. That's really cool. Lego Batman says, with the new 454B pricing increases, how much are you guys charging for a single stage baseline model with 10-year parts and labor? I'll let the other pros in the chat answer that question. Let's see if they want to. I just realized that my camera is backwards. So there we go. Now it's fixed. Let's see. Garth says, agreed. Never presume fan speeds are correct since installation. Amen. Brian says, hey Josh, how are you? Hey Brian, good to see you, man. So we got a couple California fellas in here. I had no idea. I bought a Nest thermostat before Google took it over. Literally, now I want my old school thermostat back. Do you have one, Paul? Do you have one of the ones that they recently did away with? I know Nest had announced that they were, I think it was the first generation models, that they were no longer going to support them, and Wi-Fi was no longer going to work or any of that. So I think that is not good that they did that, because you got plenty of folks out there that were left out to dry on that. Let's take a break from our chat and jump over to one of our stories that I wanted to show you guys tonight. Let's see, share tab. Let me make my face smaller. Hopefully you guys can see that. I thought this was interesting. And when I first saw this, we've all seen those companies that will offer $50 heating and air tune-ups or $100 duct cleanings. And when I first saw this, I think the title made me believe that it was a heating and air company. But the more I actually read the first paragraph, and I actually think it's a duct cleaning company, but I still think it's something to note. So bear with me here. And I don't know where Poville is. Maybe some of you do. And if you do, share in the chat where that is. But this was posted as if it was someone, it says Prince of Petworth, as if they were trying to warn others. So this is not a typical news article, but I came across this and still wanted to share it. It just posted, I think, last week. Let's see, September 15th. So, yesterday. So very, very, very new. It says, Dear Poville or Popville, Popeville. I don't know. There is a local scam going around that has now appeared on several listservs I've been on. A person joins a listserv claiming to be a member of the group, a 20-something who attends XXX congregation, then claims to have a group rate for HVAC cleanings of $150. There is indeed a company that shows up and does something if you sign up, but it is tantamount to doing nothing. And they are misleading about what services they provide. The original poster then tries to pressure you into signing more people up for the pyramid scheme. More details below. So there was a company here where I live locally that was, and I think they were either gutters or roofs. I think they were gutters though, but they were going around to these neighborhoods saying to customers, hey, we normally would charge this much for this service, but if you get 5 neighbors to come in with you, then we'll do it for this price. And I don't know if that's exactly what we're seeing here yet. We're going to keep reading here, but I struggle with that because I kind of get it from the business side, right? Yes, is it kind of schemy? Is it kind of salesy? Yes. But if your crew, I'm just picturing a gutter crew or even a heating and air company, if they're going to be in a neighborhood anyway, maybe they could offer a bit of a discount because they're not running around as much. They're already in that neighborhood. So I don't know. I kind of see it that way. That would be the argument they would probably make, but I just thought that was interesting. It says update. Someone else I talked to about this scam who also in the DMV said, I noticed the scam on my block's listserv and the police department's announcement listserv I'm on. So it is apparently really getting around. What is listserv? Do you guys know what that is? Let me see. Listserv is a type of email list software that allows users to send a single email to a group of subscribers who are all interested in a specific topic, serving as an automatic way to distribute messages and foster discussion within communities. So it's sort of like constant contact, but maybe they're picking them up because the software manages the list subscribers, handles message distribution, and can host archives of past conversations. It allows for both one-way announcement lists and two-way discussion groups, and the brand name Listserv is owned by Lsoft. Interesting. I don't know if any. I've never even heard of this, so this must be bigger in certain communities than it is where I'm located. Because I feel like I would have, if it was even here at all, I would have at least heard of it. So that's interesting. Hi all. Just want to flag for people that is email from Lisa was basically a scam. I'll explain more below. The TLDR don't do this. It's hard to read some people's writing. If you have already written to Lisa, make up an excuse and get out of it and look up real HVAC companies instead if you really want a vent cleaning. Full story. I was interested in this, so I contacted Lisa and was asked for my address and phone number. Then got a call from the HVAC company. They implied the $150 would cover 1.5 hour cleaning. So my first tip here, if you are a homeowner, and this kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, if you hear of companies saying $100 to do this, 50, if it sounds too good to be true, chances are it probably is. When the techs arrived, they did a cursory inspection that looked like them glancing at vents, then declared that they would really need to do a deep cleaning for $250 or $300. I said, nope, no thanks. I only need the $150 cleaning. That's what we agreed to on the phone. And that basic cleaning was not 1.5 hours. It was just them bringing in a giant vacuum that they attached to one vent and ran for 15 to 20 minutes. The techs who came also insisted that HVAC vents need to be cleaned yearly. They do not. Real HVAC experts will acknowledge this is something that only needs to be done every few years, if at all. And also that real cleaning is usually more expensive, but also much more involved and thorough. So I looked up HVAC cleaning online, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if we need to get in. So I was scammed with pressure, con more people into this pyramid scheme. I don't know if we need to read through all of this. I'm sure you guys have probably heard enough. But yeah, I wanted to throw that out there. I do think here's, as I said, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But I also say that if there are companies, so one thing that we used to do at my company is if we were slow that day, we would do free filter day. We would do that just to give our guys something to do. And if I'm being completely honest, yes, if you're in someone's home doing free filters and you see something else that is wrong, pointing that out, as long as you're not being disingenuous, saying, "Hey, I see that your evaporator coil is also dirty. Would you like us to clean that for $50 or whatever the price is?" Right? I don't think that that is disingenuous. But if a company is saying it's going to be one price just to get in your home to upsell you, and original uh that original price what is just that, it's just a foot in the door kind of thing. I don't know. I think that that is definitely a little scammy, especially again if they're being disingenuous about it. Let's see. Get back to our chat here. Lego says just about anything with a 1-year labor warranty is a scam. Really? Okay. Um, yeah, do tell, because I think there are some 1 year labor warranties out there that so like at my company we would offer a 3 year labor warranty with any of our installations minimum. So and what I realized was I had a customer that their fan motor failed. It was just after the 1 year that we were offering ran out, and she's like, I guess you're going to stick it to me. And I was like, no, no, you you chose us. I sold you this equipment because I believed in it, and it fell short. I feel somewhat responsible for that, and I'm going to cover this motor. The part is covered. We'll cover the labor to make this right, right? And so because of that, because I was like, I feel like should be something we do all the time and maybe even advertise, right? So then we started attaching a 3 year warranty, labor warranty to everything. But any of our high end installs, we would purchase a third party 12-year labor warranty that is still in effect to this day. Even though I sold my company a couple years ago, my some of those customers that had 12-year warranties that year, they're still covered for another 10 years from now, right? They're still covered for years and years to come because I bought it through a third party company, and I did that to protect them, not more than me. If I sold my company, which I did, or if I got hit by a bus, or if whatever, we've all heard about those roofing companies that will offer lifetime warranties only to be out of business 2 years later, right? So I just wanted to make sure folks were covered. Not in HVAC, but yes, in solar panels, Garth says. I regularly meditate in front of my Daikin Fit side discharge compressor fan. You dog, Smith. That's funny. That's pretty good. Ryan, are communicating inverter systems really that much more expensive for contractors to purchase versus two-stage equipment? The price differences around here are huge. I don't. In fact, I think a Daikin Fit, which just to get all the disclaimers out of the way, Daikin is one of our sponsors on our YouTube channel. But a Daikin Fit is in some cases less expensive than a two-stage system. And there's, I guess it just kind of depends on the ins and outs, but I would wonder if companies are charging extra because they, either they don't know how to work on them. Maybe they're anticipating an expensive breakdown, possibly. I my feeling is probably different than most in the industry on that, because we would put in a lot of inverter systems and have no issues. Whereas I've heard other guys say we only have issues. All the issues we have seem to be with inverter systems. So I don't know. I don't. I'm probably not good to speak on that because we didn't deal with some of the problems that some of these other companies seem to have out there on that. Um, and you guys know this, but the only thing you can really do, because you can't change their pricing for them, is just make sure you're getting quotes. Make sure you're comparing apples to apples the best you can. Bob says scams abound these days. Yes, they are. Ryan says, I didn't go for the scam, but I had multiple texts tell me that my system needed to be replaced without hooking up gauges or anything. Yeah, that's a little scammy, right? If they immediately say the system needs to be replaced without even diagnosing it. And to me, a heating and air company should never be the one that makes that decision. It's their job to tell you what is wrong with the system. Now, if what they tell you is wrong is it's old and it's crap and here's pictures to prove it, then fine. That's totally fine. But it's not their job to say, in my opinion, it needs to be replaced. In my opinion, it's their job to say, hey, here's what I see wrong, whether it's one or multiple issues. And it's up to you, Mr. Homeowner, to tell me if you want to replace that system instead of putting a large investment in a system that is fill in blank years old, right? That's just my opinion. There's exceptions to every rule, but in general, that should be the rule, right? They just saw the unit and said it was old, still working today. Wow. Well, it sounds like you found somebody that wasn't scamming you. Brian says, "Hey Josh, so a friend of mine called me for a second opinion because him and his wife were told that they needed a new 2-ton package unit. All was needed was two bad cap needed. Sorry. All was needed was two bad caps needed replacement. So sad." Yeah. I mean, so many times this happens way too much, right? In fact, HVAC school just posted an article. I think it was yesterday or today. I saw Ty Brannaman shared it, and I guess he helped author it. But basically, going through the ins and outs of compressors and how to diagnose it correctly, because um, I think that they are also misdiagnosed quite often. They'll say it's bad, new system or new compressor needed, and then only to find out after getting a second opinion that that is not the case. I wish every company, every single good company, and they don't, but I wish they all offered second opinions for free. So if they get a company out, homeowner has a company come out, they misdiagnose the system, and then a good company could come out and say for sure whether that is or is not correct. But I also understand if you're not a big company and you know you just simply can't afford to give free estimates, then fine. But that was something we offered. Especially if the company told them you needed a new system, we offered a free second opinion because the numbers worked out to where we would come in with a good, give them actual facts why this is bad or not bad. And folks would trust us so much that we ended up selling enough systems off of that program that it just simply made sense to offer that, a free second opinion. So Brian says here in California, this happens way too much. It's disgusting. Christian says, as a 16-year-old in high school in a plumbing pathway in my school who also wants to become a technician, what should I do? Christian, I'm trying to understand your question. Are you saying that you want to be a plumber or a heating and air guy, or are you saying you want to become both? If you're saying you want to become both, then I would say you might want to find a company that does both. But I'll be honest with you, if you could just pick one, at least for now, and get really good at it, um, then you probably would make more money quicker than trying to learn both trades and become good in both trades. Uh, at least that's my first initial thought. I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule, but um, just thinking about all the companies I worked at over the years, I became a master plumber and a master HVAC tech along the way. Um, and I think that that's probably the best way to do it. Although, if you can find a company that does both, um, then go for it. Become the hardest working guy there. Become the guy that's there before everyone gets there and leaves last, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you can move ahead. Um, that's what happened to me. I mean, I got my first manager job at the age of 26, and most of the people that worked for me were twice my age, and none of them worked as hard as I did. And that's why. I'm not saying that I knew more than they did. I think that would be pretty arrogant, but I did work harder than any of them. That I can easily say. Ryan says, I also had a door salesman tried to get me to buy $10,000 sliding door when before he said it was a third of the price jumped within minutes somehow. Interesting. There's a salesperson for everything, isn't it? Even sliding doors. Leaving the Wi-Fi on those old thermostats leaves you open to vulnerabilities. I think that's supposed to say vulnerabilities. I get why they disabled the Wi-Fi features. The thermostat still works in a preset schedule. Okay, well that's good. Um, Listserv is just an email distribution list line Mailchimp. Got it. Yeah, there must be something bigger, and like I said, other communities. We don't have that here. Jose says, "Hi, I live in Florida. I pay for a ACIQ Extreme Heat 410 mini split and air handler central AC. What you think about this brand, and what happen if in some moment need change or recharge gas?" Okay. I think ACIQ is one of those DIY brands. I know you can buy them online. Um, but I also think that they're either manufactured by ICP or affiliated with ICP in some way. And ICP has a decent reputation in our industry. Um, I think if you have it installed correctly, whether that's you or a licensed professional. Me personally, I would want everything to be installed, licensed, and insured. But if you can do it and do it right, then more power to you. Um, I actually have a video that's coming out in the next couple days about DIY HVAC and some of the risks and dangers that I don't think enough folks know about. Because I hear folks say all the time, well, I mean, I feel like I know more than my own heating and air guy, and I can't dispute that sometimes, right? But I think there are some dangers, there are some risks, and stay tuned for that video because we do have some graphic images in that video coming up that show some of those dangerous moments. Now, they're not super graphic. It's not nothing to lose sleep about, but we have some pictures of refrigerant burns. We cover some other problems that folks have had when doing DIY stuff. So, Brian, I don't know if you're saying hey to me or someone else, but hey again. Ryan says $150 sounds legitimate for most companies around my area, even though I know they don't make much without finding things to fix. It's the $20 to $60 cleanings that are more of a red flag. I mean, I think if companies were just honest about it, if they said to you, the problem is a lot of homeowners don't like transparency. A lot of them don't want you to be honest, right? I can tell you that from my own experience that it's a turnoff. They would prefer a slick salesman that tells them what they want to hear. But me personally, I feel like if a company was just honest about it and said, look, we're not making any money on this, but we're slow. We got to do something to keep our guys busy. I let my guys, regardless of what's in our queue of calls coming in, I make sure they get 40 hours a week, and there ain't but so many times we can clean our warehouse. So we're offering this rock bottom deal to get them in the door, and if we find something wrong, we're going to try to sell. We're going to charge you accordingly to fix whatever it is we found wrong. I feel like if a company was just honest about it, that's a company I would want to be tied with for forever. That's someone that I would want to continue to do business with for years to come because they're honest and they're just being honest about it. But again, I don't think everyone really wants that. Lego says a lot of times they will target older houses and homes that they have original ductwork. They did try to upsell complete duct replacement. That's the angle. Got it. Well, that makes sense. And I will say we did duct cleaning at my company, and it was not a sales tactic. There were times we would run the camera and we would have to at least repair, if not replace the ductwork, but we would always show it to them. We would show them pictures. And I think that might be what you're saying, that it's not necessarily out of malice, that it's an actual service. They're offering at rock bottom, and they also could end up finding something wrong and selling that. Jose says part 2, remember the 410 gas is discontinued. Yes, it is. Lego says absolutely, HVAC companies want to get them with the cheapest price, then charge labor on failed compressors, coils, capacitors, etc. for the next 15 years. Let's see. I'm going to try to jump through here. Who would sell me a fit? Brian says. Find you a dealer, pal. Find you a nice Daikin dealer. I think Brian, y'all you're near Richmond, and I think Johnstone offers Daikin is our local supplier. Lego says, yeah, but that's through third party home warranty. That'll probably take 2 weeks before they come out and fix the problem. It's basically home warranty. Interesting. Let's see. Trying to jump, see if we have any actual questions. Tony, good to see you, pal. You guys don't know Tony. He's the host of the HVAC TV, one of my favorite YouTube channels on the internet, and always a positive fella to be around. I love Tony. Brian says, we found many mistakes covered. Brian says, plumbing sucks. Stick with HVAC. I'm going to agree with that one. Especially Christian, if you're a smart one. You know, if you're a smart guy, you're the sky is the limit in HVAC. We haven't talked about it enough on our channel here, but the HVAC industry, it's almost like everyone is going to start over. We're going to reset. Not everyone. There's some folks in our country that have experienced air to water technology, and of course hydronics and all the different ins and outs of those sorts of technologies. But for the majority of heating and air guys that have been doing this for 20, 30 years or more, that would have had a big leg up on a new guy starting out. It's almost like everyone's starting over. When this stuff starts coming out, everyone is going to have to learn how it works, how to work on it, and so on. And because of that, someone with less experience could do very well in our industry, I think. Garth said they sold snake oil at one time. ACIQ is owned by Carrier. Frost pointing out that if you're in Florida, you probably don't need something with the, extreme low ambient temperature technology that some of these companies offer. That's a really good point. I'm skipping over Frost's next point because he used a very bad word. That word right there. We're not going to say that word right there. Blank is DIY. That's my 2 cents on that. Those of you that don't know my background, my story that I had where that company attacked me years ago. Let's see. Okay. Frost also says DIY manufacturers will not warranty their equipment if it's installed by the homeowner. That's a really good point. There are some of these companies that offer DIY products. In fact, they'll actually write DIY on the website or the product itself, the box, and then they'll put a disclaimer at the bottom that says has to be installed by a licensed company, or they will not honor warranties, or they will not provide support. And I think that's a very huge to point out. Big time. Let's see. Let's take a break from our chat and jump over to our next scam that I thought was quite interesting. It's actually not necessarily directed at HVAC specifically, but I wanted you guys to see it because I think that we could see this in our industry. And I think, and I also think because of what we're dealing with in our industry, sometimes that it might be easier to scam someone in certain situations, right? If it's super hot in your house or super cold, you might be more inclined to do something when you wouldn't normally do that, thinking with a clear head. Consumer Reports warns against TikTok scams involving Zelle Cash App payouts. Free money from Zelle or Cash App just for filling out a government form. That's what some TikTok videos claim. But some Consumer Reports has a warning. It's not a windfall. It's simply not true. Victims of scams on peer-to-peer payment platforms such as like Zelle or Cash App may try anything to get their money back. Enter Darian Delavante and Gilbert Graham Jr., two social media influencers who have garnered millions of views by incorrectly claiming that filing a complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will result in a payout from these companies, even suggesting that compensation is possible for those who were not scam victims. Graham's TikTok video says whether it happened to you or not, go put in a claim because they're going to have to run you that check. They make it sound easy, even offering a complaint templates for $77 and things like a credit repair guide for $24.99. Blah blah blah. Graham did not respond. Blah blah blah. Let's see. Um, Tips to keep you safe from payment platform scams. Be skeptical of posts promising easy money. Scammers use urgency and emotion to trick you before sending money online. Slow down. Double check who you're paying and what you're paying for. When I first started my heating and air company, I had someone almost get me, and I say almost, I mean, I was pretty skeptical right from the get-go because it was quite an odd call, but but I've actually heard of other people being got on this scam. And so what they'll do is they'll and I'm drawing a blank on exactly how it works, so forgive me, but it was something to the effect of they wanted to buy a whole bunch of heating and air equipment. I'm trying to remember how they said it. I think it was something like, my church is actually paying for it, but I want to go ahead and get everything ordered. So I'll give you a credit card number. And then once you refund the money, the church will give you a check or something like that. Uh, and my whole thing was like, well, I'll just wait till the church has the check and then I'll put it in the bank. And and they were like, no, we want to go ahead and get the ball moving, and we want to have the, it was something like that. And there was that sense of urgency. And I think these apps are another example of that, right? They can say to you, go ahead and send it Zelle or PayPal or however they say it, and it's all a scam. Um, I am getting a whiff of something, and I don't want to say what. I'm getting a heavy smell of marijuana, and I don't smoke marijuana. My wife doesn't, and I don't know why. I don't know if she's cooking something and it just smells like that to me, or I don't know, but I am getting a heavy marijuana smell, enough to where I would be concerned that someone's outside of my home and, up to no good or something, but it's raining its butt off. So I don't think that's probably the case either. But I'm getting a heavy smell right now. Um, One time years ago, it wasn't a smell. I think I heard something, but for whatever reason, I checked my cameras at my house and I saw this guy peeking in my window, in my daughter's window. And before he could get any closer, I had already gotten her out of the room and had my gun pointed at the window. So if he came through that window, he was in trouble. Um, and then I think he was just a kid playing, and it actually turned out, because I had put a picture of him from the cameras. I'm getting way off topic. We're not talking about heating and air all of a sudden, but I put a picture of this kid on Facebook in our local community and said, if someone knows this guy, let him know that he was in a lot more danger than he realized tonight, and he may not want to peek in my windows anymore. Just simply trying to tell the community, if you know this guy, let him know my windows are not the ones he wants to keep messing with. And it turned out he was a kid. He looked a lot older in the footage, but I think he was 15 or 16, and he was just hanging out with his teenagers. and just being like, hey, watch this. And it just kind of peeking in people's windows. So it turned out he was actually, he was just a kid. But anyway, so that's when I smelled that. That was like where my brain first went. Like, why am I smelling what I'm smelling? I don't smell it now anymore. But anyway, I was getting that whiff. Maybe my wife is trying to relax tonight. It would be new to me if that's what she's doing. But anyway, I just had that strong odor. Brian says we have installed or started DIY. Brian says, hey Josh, do you have any knowledge of any of the new R32 or 454B units having any known issues so far? Nothing that a homeowner should be concerned about, in my opinion. However, I'm glad you asked, Brian. We're going to be doing a video soon that some of the manufacturers actually approached me and asked me to do a video on. And that is, they're getting a plethora of control boards returned, and not because the boards are bad, but simply because the technicians are not reading the instructions and they're not plugging in the sensors that are now coming with these systems. And so they're seeing different codes pop up, and they're just automatically assuming the board is bad and ordering a replacement. And so that would be the first one that comes to mind. But other than that, I mean, you know more than anybody, Brian, because you're in the trade too, if I remember correctly. We both know that R32, it was in 410A. It's nothing new to us, so we just have some new hardware, but it's still another day at work for the rest of us, right? Frost says, I've had a couple DIY issues, but because I installed it as a licensed contractor, they honored the warranty. Right now, dealing with one brand who wants video evidence. Kind of mad about that. It is what it is. Yeah, I dealt with that a few times. I actually had a guy years ago. I called him. He was one of my sales reps, and I said, hey, I've got a gas valve bad over here on a furnace. And he said, I don't want to say the company's name, but let's just say one of my biggest competitors at the time, that their company was called Smiths. Okay. Because we don't have a Smiths in my area. So I'll just say that. But anyway, I called him and I said, yeah, I got a bad valve over here. Do you have any? When can you get me one? And it was under warranty. And he said, are you sure the valve is bad? Did you check this or that? And I said, who do you think you're talking to? You're not talking to Smiths, And anyway, I still laugh about that to this day, getting on him. Frost says, I've been getting very pushy Indian spam callers about providing leads at low prices. Something tells me they're not going to get me any leads. I tell you, Frost, you should do this. I used to, when I had my company, companies would call, or people would call me and say, hey, we've got all these leads coming in, and we want to send them your way. And I would say, no problem. I'll charge you $50 per lead. And they would say, no, we charge you. And I'd say, no, you're the one that can't keep up with your leads. You can't take care of your customers. So I'm going to give you a discount. I'm only going to charge you $50 for every customer you can't take care of. So just send them on over. I'll send you an invoice, however many you want to send, but I charge $50 per customer. And they stopped calling me, which was funny. Gary says, is there a skunk nearby? One thing about me, Gary, is I have a very sensitive sense of smell. I have a very good palate. And it's actually a curse. I actually don't think it's a good thing, because I'm so sensitive to smells. I don't like being around cigarette smoke. I don't like being in homes that have certain specific odors. If they have pets and there's a heavy urine smell because of that or something like that, it's always been a curse. So that said, I know what, I'm very sensitive to smells, and I know skunk, and that was not skunk what I just smelled. So I don't know where that came. I guess it's possible that the neighbors are hitting the hitting the, the hookah tonight or whatever, and it floated over my way. I don't know, but I don't smell it now. So yeah. Brian says the diagnostic flow chart is translated poorly. I actually agree with that. And I think many in the trade, many of the manufacturers themselves would probably agree with you too, that there should be a better way, an easier way. But hopefully, videos we do will help alleviate that. Rap music 2000s. I probably have listened to your channel a few times. I'm not a big rap music fan, but I do, you know, I remember Dre and some of the stuff we used to listen to in high school. Of course, Eminem had just come out around those times. But anyway, just graduated college for HVAC. Should I have waited for the new systems laws and regulations? I think there would be new schooling requirements. No. Honestly, I mean, I think that if you went to college, you're probably smarter than I am. Honestly, a lot of this stuff, if they would just read the instructions, I used to tell guys that would come to my class. I had a guy, a couple months ago. He said, "How do I move ahead quick, Josh? How do I learn this trade quicker than the rest?" And I told him, "Go home. Don't watch my stuff. I'm not that smart, but watch Ty Brannaman, Brian Orr, Craig Migliaccio, um, and I mean Tony was just in here. Probably watch Tony's stuff too. You watch those four guys. If you were to watch their stuff, one video each every night, you would be so far beyond the average technician going into supply houses tomorrow. You would be so far further along than those guys. Then I mean, it would just, you would not believe how much quicker. But reading the instructions alone, I would go so far as to say that at least 60% of installations, and probably higher, I'm actually being very conservative on that number, 60% of installs tomorrow, if we were to take the entire country and the, I don't know, 50,000 systems installed tomorrow, or however many, 10,000 systems installed tomorrow, that as much as 60, if not more, percent of those jobs, no technician on that job site opened up the instruction manual that day. And to put that in perspective, not that I'm so great, I was hyper vigilant on just everything had to be right. I opened the instruction manual on every single install of all time. If I ever did a heating and air installation, the only exception to that rule might be if we were putting the exact same system in. So there were these apartment complexes where we were putting in like two systems a day. And I had, 5, 6 guys running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Maybe on those jobs, maybe I didn't pull out the instructions every day. I mean, on every job. But other than that, I mean, unless you're memorizing the airflow charts and you're, setting everything. I mean, I don't know how these guys are comfortable not reading the instructions on every single install and then still being able to go home and, sleep at night, and know that everything was done correctly. I think you should be cracking open that install manual on every single install. I genuinely think that, and reading it, but we're going to wrap up here soon, guys. We've still got some more questions, and I will get to your questions, but do me a favor. If you're still here, still in the chat, do me a favor. And that is, we all know there are bad apples in our industry that make all heating and air companies look bad. If you know a good apple, a good heating and air, plumbing, or electrical company in this country, a good one, share their name in the chat and where they're located. We'll show some love. I'll pop them up right here. But you never know. You might share more than love. You might send some business their way if someone in your area sees your comment. So let's fill up the chat with good companies. Brian says, Josh, I have gone behind so many DIY setups. Same. I feel the way I do because of my experiences. I don't hate DIY because I hate that a homeowner is taking money away from my family. Trust me, we stayed busy enough. That was never the case. I went behind enough of them, just like you, Brian. And it always costs the homeowner more money. Very good point. The saying goes, skilled labor isn't cheap, and cheap labor isn't skilled. Rap music says, like, should I have waited to go to school? I don't think you needed to, man. I think you're just fine. The new systems, unless you're talking about the air to water technology that's not going to come out. I mean, it's going to start coming out next year, but it's not going to really take over our industry for another. I mean, it's we still probably have a handful of years of these new A2L refrigerant systems that are going to be bought and sold for definitely the next several years. I think it's probably going to be 2030, 2031 before we start seeing the majority of systems sold. I mean, the AIM doesn't even have 410A or these other refrigerants getting down to 15% of original production until the year 2036. So even if we have air to water technology and those of us start getting our hands on it, it still won't be the majority of things sold for years to come. So unless that's what you're talking about, but if you're simply talking about these new A2L refrigerant systems, then I think you're fine. Just read the instructions and learn as you go. And I don't think you missed out on anything by going ahead and getting your schooling. Frost says, yeah, I'm not sure why they're being this extra, but I'm not really happy they're putting my name on the line. I'm gonna be yelling at someone on Friday. Also, I get my work from word to word, word of mouth, or Facebook groups. I like it. Remind me again, Frost, where you're located, just out of curiosity. Let's see. Gary says, thanks for the great Q&A, Josh. Catch you on the next one. Have a good night, Gary. Thanks for joining us. Rap music says, they do say keep your nose clean and maybe some basil or parsley in spaghetti sauce. Vassar's Service in Richmond. Brian showing some love. So shout out to those. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Vassar's. I don't remember them when I worked in Richmond, but that doesn't mean much. I've learned Richmond, there are companies that stay in their area. I mean, because I worked on the south side and we pretty much worked on the south side. I remember doing a couple jobs on the north side and a couple on the east end, but 95% of what we did was on the south side of Richmond. And there are other companies that work in short pump and they only work in short pump for the most part. So there's very high possibility that this Vassar's could be, wherever, Mechanicsville, wherever they are. And I just never heard of them simply because of that. I was on honor roll and found the reason for no start on a demo 2-ton. It was a fuse. The whole class was going crazy. Couldn't find the error. I found it in 2 minutes. Good job, pal. It sounds like you at least know how to read a meter, and that probably puts you ahead of many. Air to water I have been using for years. Can you put their names up for me, please, so I can look their channels up? I will in just a minute. Rap music. Brian says steam special short pump sold to FH. Gotcha. All right, let's see. Can I put their channels up? Well, you could probably just search them. So Brian Orr's is called HVAC School, so I'll put that. Ty's is called Love to HVAC. Craig Migliaccios is called AC Service Tech. And and then Tony's is called HVAC TV. So I just put all those right there. Brian says Valley Wide Home Improvements in Fresno County, California. Or in Fresno County, make sure you are calling Valley Wide Home Improvements. Very good enough. Well, guys, I do want to again say thank you for taking time out of your busy Tuesday night to join us. I will be back next Tuesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. And again, keep an eye out for that video I have coming out on the dangers of DIY. That should be coming out in a couple days. That said, appreciate you all. Have a great week. Take care.